Does testosterone replacement therapy increase IGF-1? But first, before we dig deep, we need to talk about what a functional growth hormone pathway looks like. Let's take a look at the pathway of growth hormone production. All right. Growth hormone, it all starts at the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus releases what's known as growth hormone releasing hormone, somatotropin, and that tells the anterior pituitary to make growth hormone. When growth hormone is released, it tells the liver to make IGF-1. Now, IGF-1 has functions. It exerts its functions peripherally, meaning in the peripheral tissues like the cartilaginous structures, but it also has autocrine slash paracrine activities, meaning that it will also exert its effects locally, especially like within the liver itself. When IGF-1 levels go up and it reaches a sufficient level, now when I say sufficient, that's specific to each person. I mean, what my body may deem as sufficient may be 200. Your body may deem 400. I don't know. Everyone's different. So when we say sufficient, you got to think that's a lot of nuance to that. Anyway, when IGF-1 reaches what your body perceives to be as a sufficient level, it will actually stimulate the pancreas. I believe it's the Olive Langerhans cells to produce what's known as somatostatin, which is also known as growth hormone inhibiting hormone. So, okay, here we go. GHRH tells the pituitary to make GH. GH tells the liver to make IGF-1 when it reaches sufficient levels. The pancreas produces somatostatin, so aka growth hormone inhibiting hormone. So that's the typical pathway, but there's also the Ghrelin pathway right here. Some people refer to it as the GHS system, which means growth hormone secretagogue system, or just the Ghrelin system, whatever. Ghrelin is typically produced primarily in states of fasting, states of hunger, hence why it's historically been dubbed the quote unquote the hunger hormone. All right, so during those states, fasting, hunger, whenever Ghrelin is released, it inhibits growth hormone inhibiting hormone. It blocks somatostatin, which therefore allows for more growth hormone releasing hormone to be produced, and therefore that goes down the pathway until IGF-1's made. Then when IGF-1 reaches sufficient levels, we go back to here, and growth hormone inhibiting hormone will be produced until you need more GH to be released again. So what has the literature shown us in terms of TRT and IGF-1 production? Yes, the introduction of testosterone replacement therapy can actually increase the amount of GH production you can have. But this is assuming that you have a fully intact, healthy, endogenous growth hormone releasing system. So if you are not functionally producing enough GHRH or producing enough growth hormone from the pituitary, then even if you introduce TRT, you're not really going to get a good, robust response. Now, this may sound like an obvious answer, but in some of the studies that have shown, when you have a comparison between a group that is on TRT plus growth hormone versus a group that's just on growth hormone or just on testosterone alone, the combined group will get a greater augmented response. Of course, you're thinking, well, we would expect that. Yes, but also in those independent groups, whether it's just TRT group or whether it's just a growth hormone only group, they both do have increased production of growth hormone. But so what this is getting at is that your GHRH system, your growth hormone production system, does have sensitivity to both growth hormone and or testosterone independently, but when you combine them, you have an augmented response. There's other things you also have to take into consideration as well. So we already talked about the fact that yes, there is sensitivity to testosterone in terms of growth hormone production, assuming your growth hormone system is still fully intact. Now, let's assume the GH production system is still fully intact. Another thing you have to think about is that growth hormone is primarily released in stage 3 and stage 4 of what we refer to as DWS, or deep wave sleep. I've actually indirectly diagnosed people with sleep apnea just based on their very, very, very low IGF-1 levels. I've seen guys in the 70s, 80s, 90s that are on TRT that are otherwise healthy and have no metabolic conditions going on, but their IGF-1 was really low, so I suggest they get a sleep study done, and lo and behold, they have sleep apnea. Upon getting on a CPAP, getting their sleep dialed in, you will see some return of the IGF-1 levels. I've never seen anything like overtly great, but I have seen increased levels upon getting the sleep apnea treated. Another consideration to think about is the fact that IGF-1 is primarily, it's principally, I think somewhere in the ballpark 70 to 80% of overall IGF-1 production is produced primarily from the liver. With that being said, if you have a diseased, fibrotic, very unhealthy liver, the liver is not going to be capable of producing robust IGF-1 levels. So again, this may be another tool for ruling in, ruling out other possible co-occurring etiologies that may be contributing to a low IGF-1 production. In my opinion, if you have a metabolic patient, if you have someone insulin resistance, or let's just say that you suspect the patient has fatty liver disease, besides looking at the obvious, like their LFTs chronically going up, besides looking at their lipid profile, besides looking at their insulin levels, I think, then this is my opinion, I think you should also look at their IGF-1 levels and their adiponectin levels. Those two may also indicate some severity or possible fatty liver disease. And lastly, I want to talk about thyroid disease, particularly hypothyroidism and low GH, low IGF-1. It's well established in the literature that hypothyroidism does actually cause low IGF-1 because there is a relationship between the GH pathway and the thyroid gland. And what the literature has even shown us is that if you get the patient on robust, if you get them on a good thyroid replacement protocol, you can actually have return of the GH/IGF-1 production. Now, to what degree, how much it'll be, if it'll be a robust response or not, that's ultimately patient contingent. But yes, if the patient is hypothyroid and you get them on thyroid meds, you can have return of this production. Now, let's say the patient's TSH is low, their FSH, their LH is also low, then the patient possibly has panhypopituitarism, and at that point, they probably have a whole host of hormonal deficiencies. But those are very, very, very small outliers, and I honestly never see that. All right, that was fun. I've been meaning to make this video for quite some time. I actually have a whole list here of all these different pieces of content that I'd like to make. But this one was really one that I've been especially trying to focus on. But life gets in the way sometimes. Anyway, references will be popping up here shortly if you want to take a look at some of the references I got. I appreciate you watching, and I will see y'all next time.